war, poverty, climate change, and institutional collapse. We live in interesting and troubling times. The tension between our desire to change the world for the better and our feeling of powerlessness in the face of overwhelming odds can feel so great that we just break. Whether you want to call this nihilism, pessimism, doomerism, or whatever else, the idea that there's just no hope for humanity seems to have become more and more popular over the last few years, or at least has become more visible to me personally among people I interact with online and in person. I think this is something that needs to be seriously challenged. I'm not just going to point to lines on a graph here and ask you to believe me that the world is getting better, even if you feel like it isn't. Plenty of other people have done valuable work making this kind of statistical case for optimism, and I just don't think it's enough. It's missing something on its own. Instead, I want to give you my perspective, my own framework, and hopefully make the case for the singular importance of simply believing that change is possible, and that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a better world is still worth fighting for. One common excuse for pessimism is that it's not really pessimism at all, but realism. Think about any of those problems I mentioned at the start of the video. How many times have you heard someone say that there's just nothing we can do about climate change because of overwhelming corporate power, a disengaged population, or just general selfishness? Or in the United States specifically, there's a growing contingent of people who actually endorse breaking up the nation as the only solution to political dysfunction. These ideas are all cloaked in the language of realism. Their proponents pitch themselves as the only people willing to speak the harsh or unavoidable truth about a situation. They might use realist language to justify their policy goals, but are they really being realistic or just pessimistic? Fortunately, there's a lot we can learn from history about these types of claims. If you've ever taken an economics class, you might have heard of Thomas Malthus. He was a pioneering economist that lived between 1766 and 1834. And he believed that since population growth was geometric and agricultural production was linear, that population growth would eventually outpace food production, leading to famine, war, social strife, generally a lot of really terrible things until population was forced to return to an equilibrium. Doesn't this seem pretty intuitive? Realistic, even? We observe population crashes in nature all the time, and after all, what are we but primates that learned how to make fire? Unfortunately, inspired by Malthus's predictions, many countries engaged in acts of cruelty and awful programs of population control, justified by the belief of some that humanity was on a collision course with the laws of reality. Of course, we know today that Malthus turned out to be wrong. He couldn't see the productivity increases that industrialized agriculture would bring, and certainly not the phenomenon of total population decline in rich nations. But that's an example of where unchecked realism can take you. It limits your vision and creativity and ultimately can encourage some pretty distressing decision-making. One of Nietzsche's famous aphorisms in his book The Twilight of the Idols is, "If you have a why for life, you can bear almost any how." A version of that quote was employed by the psychologist Viktor Frankl in his book Man's Search for Meaning. As a result of his experiences in the Auschwitz concentration camp, Frankl was convinced of the importance of finding a meaning in life, even in the most terrible circumstances. Frankl thought that from the perspective of the individual, thinking in terms of what we are realistically capable of actually makes us worse in the end.
If we seem to be idealists and are overestimating, overrating man, and looking at him that high, here above, you know what happens? We promote him to what he really can be. So we have to be idealists in a way, because then we'll wind up as the true, the real realists. And you know who has said this? If we take man as he is, we make him worse. But if we take man as he should be, we make him capable of becoming what he can be. This was not my flight instructor, this was not me, this was Goethe. He said this verbally. So if you don't recognize a young man's will to meaning, man's search for meaning, you make him worse, you make him dull, you make him frustrated, you still add and contribute to his frustration. While if you presuppose in this man, even in this so-called criminal or juvenile delinquent or drug abuse and so forth, there must be a what we call spark, a spark of search for meaning. Let's recognize this. Let's presuppose it. And then you will elicit it from him, and you will make him become what he in principle is capable of becoming.
If you take man for what he is, you make him worse. If you treat man as he should be, you make him capable of becoming what he can be. Can't this sentiment be applied to societies as well? Many of those who took the perspective of the quote-unquote realists ended up endorsing policies that made life worse for a lot of people. Politicians in England took overpopulation as license to endorse famine as an effective mechanism for reducing overpopulation in Ireland. Between 1976 and 1977, as part of a general suspension of civil liberties, India forcibly sterilized millions of people. In the United States, eugenicists used overpopulation rhetoric as part of their own rationale for sterilization campaigns. Pessimists took society as it was, projected the worst possible conclusion from a trend, and then used faulty assumptions to justify actively making the world a worse place. This is not what being realistic looks like. A real realist takes into account the human ability to grow and develop in our capacity. A real realist recognizes that while the future remains uncertain and change is difficult, not a single worthwhile thing was ever achieved by someone who, in the depths of their own cynicism, really believed that they were capable of nothing more than what they were already doing. It seems obvious, but individuals having a personal belief that change is possible and having the self-confidence to act on their beliefs in meaningful ways is a prerequisite to change actually being possible. But surely this time is different. I can practically hear some of you thinking, and you're right, there's never going to be an analogy from history that perfectly matches what we're going through as a society right now. But consider for a moment the conditions that other generations faced, the systems of oppression that have been overturned and discarded, unimaginable to many of us today, that were once thought to be just unavoidable. Whatever you're thinking of, maybe monarchy, serfdom, slavery, or apartheid, every single elimination or limitation placed on any of those systems of oppression depended on average people who believed that the strength of what they were fighting for was greater than the odds that they were against.
The realities of human faith and of passion and of belief. Force is ultimately more powerful than all of the calculations of our economists or of our generals. Of course, to adhere to standards, to idealism, to vision, in the face of immediate dangers, takes great courage and takes self-confidence. But we also know that only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. It is this new idealism, which is also, I believe, the common heritage of a generation, which has learned that while efficiency can lead to the camps at Auschwitz or the streets of Budapest, only the ideals of humanity and love can climb the hills of the Acropolis.
That was Robert F. Kennedy, senator from New York in 1966, in the midst of the Vietnam War and nuclear proliferation, delivering a speech to a university audience in apartheid South Africa 3 years after his brother, President John F. Kennedy, was assassinated. 2 years before 1968, when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, he himself was assassinated, and this man carried 5 states in a presidential election.
In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
I don't mean to minimize the challenges that we face today, but if someone in that environment can believe that change is possible, can't we?
There is discrimination in New York, the racial inequality of apartheid in South Africa, and serfdom in the mountains of Peru. People starve to death in the streets of India. A former prime minister is summarily executed in the Congo. Intellectuals go to jail in Russia, and thousands are slaughtered in Indonesia. Wealth is lavished on armaments everywhere in the world. These are different evils, but they are the common works of man.
Nothing that can rightfully be called a common work of humanity cannot be improved, changed, or if need be, unmade by humanity. The fact that human institutions and structures can only be altered by human effort is empowering, I think, but it also gives me a sense of responsibility. The Athenian general Pericles said in his famous funeral oration that when you realize Athens' greatness, then reflect that what made her great was men with a spirit of adventure, men who knew their duty. Robert F. Kennedy, referring to this same quote, called this duty the source of greatness in all societies. And this is an individual duty. It was John Donne in his poem For Whom the Bell Tolls that said, "No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." That's why it's important not just that society generally believes that change can be possible, but that you believe it's possible. Society is made of people, and there's nobody coming to replace you if you drop out. There's always something to do, even small things. For practically any general issue you can imagine, there will be an organization near you doing practical work on the ground. If you can't do that, the internet makes connecting with other people easier than ever, and being involved in online communities puts you in a great position to counteract defeatist rhetoric where, in my opinion, it's at its most prevalent. If that's not an option either, take Frankl and Goethe's advice and view your own capabilities highly. Work on yourself, learn about the problems facing the world. Why is there poverty? What causes repression? And why do institutions fail?
The cruelties and the obstacles of this swiftly changing planet will not yield to obsolete dogmas and outworn slogans. It cannot be moved by those who cling to a present which is already dying, who prefer the illusion of security to the excitement and danger which comes with even the most peaceful progress. This world demands the qualities of youth, not a time of life, but a state of mind, a temper of the will, a quality of the imagination, a predominance of courage over timidity, of the appetite for adventure over the life of ease.
We will build a better world because stagnation means that things get worse. We will alleviate poverty, enable justice, and maintain peace because we can. There will be no intervention. Nobody is coming to save us. But if we believe that we can, and only if we believe that we will save us.
Our future may lie beyond our vision, but it is not completely beyond our control. It is the shaping impulse of America that neither fate nor nature, nor the irresistible tides of history, but the work of our own hands, matched to reason and principle, that will determine our destiny. There is pride in that, even arrogance, but there is also experience and truth. And in any event, it is the only way we can live.
Hi, this is Ryan. Thanks so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe so that YouTube will let you know whenever I make more. I'd love to read your thoughts about all this in the comments. There's so many historical examples of people coming together to overcome some really great challenges. Let me know your favorite. See you soon.